There we go. Sipple, it says we're live. You got the glasses on, got the glasses off.
Off, on, off, on.
Just like the football season that for Nebraska is now officially completed.
Yeah, how about that?
How about that? It just kind of ended.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish we were talking about a bowl game. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Well, here we are. It is Monday, lunch hour. And this is Husker Extra live, presented as it has been all season long by Tom Dinsdale, Hyundai of Grand Island. Really appreciate those guys for their support, being along with us for the entire ride this season. We'll give a few minutes for people to join us here on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll get into questions. But yeah, Sipple. So just the rundown. Obviously, if you're watching this, you probably know this, but Nebraska beat Rutgers on Friday night, got back late overnight, in the wee hours of Saturday morning, and then later in the day on Saturday decided that they would not pursue an opportunity to bowl game, which they absolutely would have had if they wanted it, and then announced that decision on Sunday morning. So here we are, sort of suddenly, it's the off season, Simple.
Yeah, we're kind of wrap up the season that was. And it, like, because there was some doubt about what they were going to do, it arrived sort of fast. This all happened pretty quickly, as you said. Think about it. They got, like you said, they got back at 3:30 a.m. And then on Saturday around noon decided that was it, and then announced it yesterday. And so here we sit to sort of think about the season that was and the future. And man, there is a lot to talk about in that regard. Think about
it's interesting.
What could be happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like yesterday, I was we got back from New Jersey like around noon on Saturday, and then wrote about the bowl possibilities because it was becoming very clear that they were going to have the opportunity to play in one if they wanted it. And so I figured, on Sunday, I'll just kind of do the normal rewind stuff, watch the game again, whatever. And then it dawned on me as I was doing that yesterday morning, the season is over. So it sort of tried to shift into wrap up mindset then. So yeah, it was interesting. There's obviously plenty to talk about. We've got some comments beginning to filter in. Thank you everyone for joining us. Chris jumps in on Facebook with, I guess, Sipple, what is a very simple question, which is going to be one of the biggest of the offseason. And he just says, who's the QB next year?
Well, I think what they would do, well, I don't know exactly what they'll do. What I'm inclined to think is they will ride with the guys they have. I've heard nothing that would suggest any of them are going into the portal, although you never know.
Yeah.
But if they don't, then you have Smothers pushing McCaffrey, pushing Adrian. And I think they feel, and it's not like we don't talk to anybody. I think they feel good about their room.
Yeah.
Adrian played well in 3 of the last 4 games. Okay. He didn't play well in the first half on Friday night, but he played awfully well in the second.
Yeah.
He would come back as a 4th-year starter with a lot of baggage, but I don't know, Parker. It seems like as humans, what we do is we always sort of think the worst is going to happen.
Right.
And I think one thing a fan might do is say, wow, what if, Adrian, if he catches fire again, what will that look like? As a grown man with all that experience playing that position. What I am telling you, Parker, is I would be inclined to ride with Adrian.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just think it's going to engender a lot of conversation this offseason, whether there's, if we go the entire offseason and we never hear a single report of Nebraska sniffing around on any graduate transfer or anything like that, it's still going to be a lot of conversation. And that's
outside. Does it have to be inside? Do they have to have a bunch of conversation?
Well, yes, in one way. And it's not so much about who's the starter. The conversation within the walls at Memorial Stadium is going to be the passing game needs to be a lot better than it was this year. I mean, there's just no doubt about that.
Yeah.
They had 5 touchdown passes and 9 interceptions on the year. That it was like a revelation when a deep ball got thrown down the sideline and Wan'Dale Robinson caught it on Friday night. It's literally the first time this year, we've seen a ball like that thrown. Like you can't.
But as you know, that's not just a quarterback conversation.
No. Of course it's not. Of course it's not. But when you are the decision makers over there, and you're talking about a primary group in this conversation of Scott Frost, Mario Verduzco, Matt Lubick, that one of the central questions, which is related to Chris's question, but it's not exactly the same, is what ailed the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly, there's not a simple answer to that question, because if there was, maybe it would be answered by now. So the question, the question is, what's the root cause? And if it's a lot of things, like how do you make a little gain in a lot of different areas? And if they decide on one driving factor, how do you get it fixed? So maybe that answer involves the quarterbacks, maybe it doesn't.
Well, I believe it involves everybody. I think it involves protection foremost. I think I always say you start up front. So I think you start with the protection. It was okay at times. It was good on Friday night. And when he's protected, he throws it pretty well. Adrian, I think how much impact do you think it has on the quarterback when you don't have a viable running game? If Dedrick Mills had been healthy all year, I think that has a dramatic impact on your quarterback. And we've talked for 2 or 3 years now about the lack of a big-time receiver other than Wan'Dale, who's a pure slot guy. I'm talking about a big-time wideout. All of that affects the quarterback.
Sure.
And I sometimes I think all you'd have to do is maybe it's as simple as putting Adrian Martinez on a team that has all that. And I wonder what that would look like.
No,
I bet it would look really good. I bet it'd look really good.
Yeah, right. And I'm not disagreeing with you, but there's also, the way that they're constructed now, they've put so much on Adrian in terms of the run game, in terms of the quarterbacks in the run game, that look what's happened. I mean, he's dealt with multiple injuries each of the past 3 years. And now we've seen 2 seasons of Luke McCaffrey in limited duty, by the way, and he's dealt with injuries in both of those seasons too. We saw him not available on Friday night against Rutgers. So, you've got to find a way to, you've got to find a way to keep those guys healthy too. I mean, that's definitely.
Why do they ask so much out of those guys? Because they have to.
Right.
Because they have to. Adrian, I heard you say it, and it stopped me in my tracks. There were 21 called QB runs against Rutgers. Is that what you said? 21 called runs?
I don't think I said that, but that sounds right.
I thought you said that. Well, he ran it 24 or 5 times or 23 times.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were called runs.
A lot of them were, yeah.
But the fact is they have to do that.
Right.
And what I've been imploring, and if I always say, if I sat down with Frost at Perkins and he said, "Hey, I know you don't know a lot about football, Sip, but what do you think about our offense?" I'd say quit putting so much heat on your quarterback. Right. Why does Adrian have to run it 21 times for 150 yards and pass it for 250 to beat a team? It's putting too much on that guy. Of course, there's strain on him. Then you add the mental and physical strain of that with just the strain of the pressures of playing in this program. It's too much. You got to get help. You got to get help. You got to get more guys around it.
Brian asks, that's good quarterback talk. I'm sure there'll be more. Brian asks, does Frost have a closing press conference? Brian, it's possible we haven't heard anything about that so far, but
we got to push for that, Brian. We got to push for that.
Yeah. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Luke says, how many, if any, players do you think Frost should pursue in the transfer portal? And are there any that maybe they already have their eye on? Luke, that's a good question. So as things stand right now, Nebraska signed 19 players on the early signing day. They have a graduate transfer in Chris Kolarovec also on board. He's not technically signed, but he'll be on campus in January. So that's 20. They have a maximum of 25 spots. So the short story here is they have 5 spots remaining. Now, probably, and I see a question in here about the odds of Avante Dickerson jumping ship and coming to Lincoln from Jeremy. Probably you'd like to use at least a couple of those spots on high school players still. And whether that's, Avante Dickerson, the kid from West Side, very talented, who didn't sign with Minnesota early, whether that's a linebacker like Wyndon Hohuli from Hawaii, Tia Savea, the defensive lineman from Vegas. There's some guys out there that they're obviously very high on that they're still recruiting. So you're going to end up with somewhere probably, assuming they sign like even one guy in February, somewhere less than 5 spots available. Now, maybe between now and February 3rd or whenever signing day is, the early February one, maybe they find some guys in the portal they really like and they decide, hey, if we can get this person on board in the next couple of weeks, that's a good use of a spot. What I tend to think is going to happen is they'll be looking in the portal, but recruiting primarily high school guys, see how many you get. Let's say you get 3 you really like, then you go into the rest of the offseason with 2 spots available. But those numbers involve, obviously, you got to find guys you like, whether it's high school or transfer. You got to get them to say, yeah, I'm coming to Nebraska. And then you see where the numbers fall out.
But the bottom line is 5 spots.
5 spots remaining as of right now, yeah. And Sipple, by the way, did you see TJ Pledger, the running back from Oklahoma, went in the portal this morning?
He did?
Yeah.
Man, why those Oklahoma guys jump in the portal as running
Their top running back. I don't know. I haven't seen anything, like I haven't seen him say anything about it or anything like that. But they have another guy, Ramondre Stevenson, who missed part of the year. I think he was suspended maybe by the NCAA. He's really good. So maybe Pledger was decided to go play somewhere else. This guy Nebraska recruited, I think it was maybe the last staff actually, before he went to Oklahoma. Anyways, good afternoon, Javon. What's up? Wade, would have been fun to play Mizzou in Nashville in the Music City Bowl.
Yeah, it would have. It would have been great fun. Old Big 12 foe. We could revisit a lot of great stories. But no, that would have been fun. That would have been fun.
Navy Thomas echoes your sentiment there, Sipple, and says, end of the season, miserable. Jeremy says, I think Nebraska should change its mind and go play Army. I know it wouldn't happen, but it'd be a great gesture. Yeah, Army really got screwed. So, did you see that?
Yeah,
9-2, and they can't get a bowl game because conferences have tie-ins. Yeah, I mean, it would have been very interesting if it would have played out differently than it did, but it didn't. Players voted on Saturday, and there wasn't enough support to go play.
Right. I think we should emphasize that there were plenty of players that wanted to play for Nebraska. So it wasn't like this was some kind of unanimous there was a lot. I'm just going to say that a lot of players wanted to play.
Zach says, why didn't the Huskers run the option more this year? It seemed like it worked every time they did it. Do you think they'll run it more next year? Zach, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, so in the last 2 weeks, it wasn't many, but I think maybe like 4 snaps on Friday night where Adrian was under center and they literally, they ran a bootleg and they ran an end around, I think last week against Minnesota. They showed a little bit more of that late in the season.
They ran a down the line option at the goal line at the school.
Yeah, and they got Wandale Robinson a touchdown and also a wicked shot to the rib cage. But yeah, I think it will always be worked in. It's interesting, and we don't need to go into a full X's and O's session here, but option is really, I mean, a lot of their run game is option based, right? I mean, it's zone read. There are options involved, and a lot of the, I've seen people sort of critique the opening play, right? I mean, they fumbled twice on sort of sideways passes. They threw another ball to the flat again to Austin Allen on Friday against Rutgers. And the thing about that is like that stuff is option too, right? I mean, Frost said the play call on the one that Luke McCaffrey fumbled was outside zone. That's a run play, but it's run pass, and you have the ability to throw if you like your numbers in that. So, Zach, I guess the simplest way to say it is a lot of this offense is predicated on option principles, even when it doesn't look like the old speed option down the line. But I do think that I wonder if they think that there'll be room for more of that stuff, and maybe I don't know, maybe a little bit more under center work, going forward into the future.
Well, Parker, I don't like to do this, but I did cover that program when they ran a lot of down the line options.
Did you really?
Yeah, and I know this about it. It takes a lot of timing, and it takes a lot. It's very precise, so it requires a lot of practice time. It's not something you can just say, "Hey, let's run an option now." Like you got to work it. You got to work that stuff over and over. Hey, I used to watch those practices. It was incredible. They'd run it 70 times. I mean, they just worked it and worked it and worked it and worked it. It's not one of those plays where you can just say, okay, we're going to run a couple down the line speed options today and then run it against Wisconsin. That's not the way it's kind of. It takes a lot of practice time.
Well, you saw even against Rutgers. I mean, they had two fumbles at the mesh point between Martinez and Mills. Got both of those ones back. But stuff's not. I mean, it sounds really easy, but there's a lot of ways you can go wrong too.
Yeah.
Katie, great way to end the season. Wishing everyone happy holidays and thanks for great reporting. Oh, thanks, Katie. And yes, happy holidays to everybody. Did we ever really see the offensive tempo the coaching staff is looking for this year? That's a good question, Jason. What do you think, Sipple?
Sporadically.
Yeah.
When they didn't, I mean, the offense was, I don't know what it finished, Parker, 93rd nationally in yards per play? Is that what you wrote today? 93rd nationally in yards per play. They don't, they can only really rev it up when they're having success. And they just, there was a lot of fits and starts. Frost talked about that in the post-game Zoom session. They would get the offense going at times, but it was inconsistent. That's why you don't see that revved up, consistent system that you would like to see.
Yeah, but then it's interesting, right? Because so on Friday against Rutgers, they didn't play at warp speed, but they had the ball for 39 minutes and 31 seconds, and they ran 86 plays. So there's not much to you didn't see that sort of warp speed tempo, not often, but dominated the game.
Bit. Yeah, a little bit. No, but not often. It's not. I don't know. The way I look at that conversation is, and Frost has said this too, so we have to represent this accurately. He likes to have the ability to do that. There are definitely times when you want to take your foot off the gas. Oklahoma, I thought Oklahoma, when Stoops was there, did a great job of. They would speed up sometimes, but they could slow it to a crawl too if the situation, situation called for it. I thought Stoops managed that really well, and I imagine that guy they have there does the same thing. I just don't watch him as much anymore because we're not in the same league. But I don't know. I think Frost thinks that way too. There are times when it's just not appropriate to go too fast.
Right.
God, they're just trying to get yards right now.
I know. Yeah, right. For real. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Chris asks, is it best if Luke McCaffrey switches positions?
Boy, there's a half-hour conversation.
That's what I'm talking about when I say that the quarterback's going to dominate. It's going to be a huge, point of conversation even within the walls, even if they like where they're at. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to work through. I think that conversation is going to be based on what Luke wants to do, honestly. I mean,
I do too.
I think that's going to be a big part of the equation.
Yeah. And what if Luke just says, I want to be a quarterback? Then do they say, okay, you're a quarterback, you got to compete. End of conversation. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would think.
What I guess I'm hoping, Parker, that within the walls, it's not a big conversation. Luke, you're a quarterback. You just like this year, you challenge Adrian. Logan, you're in the picture. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go. Dan, thoughts on which assistant coaches might change? Damon, our friend of the program, Damon Benning, put the over-under at 2.5 staff changes. Well,
did he really today on the radio?
I think it was. I think it was in the post-game show on Friday night. I think
2.5.
I mean, I think that there's obviously you just expect staff change at some level at this point. It's happened both years. The whole coaching staff came as one contiguous group from Central Florida, and they've still had turnover both years. One guy took a job after the first year, Mike Dawson, and then they had two changes last year, including Dawson coming back. So you expect it, and it could be either that Frost decides he needs to make a change somewhere along the way, or guys could move on their own too. So I'm not going to sit here. I know that you guys, like readers, viewers, I know you hear this a lot, listeners, whatever. Like, I'm not going to speculate about someone's job status. It's not really my position to do that, but I do think, when we were talking about root causes of issues, there's real pressure to get that figured out, and coaching is obviously a factor in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What really, Michael asked, what really is Adrian playing well, being the 5th leading rusher in the Big Ten, but can't pass past 15 yards efficiently?
Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. They didn't do that. They didn't throw the ball downfield. What was your stat today? They averaged 6.6 yards per pass, 6.6 yards per attempt, which is what did you say? Was that 93rd nationally?
That was 93rd nationally. And even last year, we thought that passing game had to get better after last year. Last year, they averaged 7.9. So,
yeah, it's correct to say that they didn't have an efficient downfield game. But again, I think that conversation is complicated. It does involve. I think what with Adrian, I do think he has the arm strength. I think it's a decision-making discussion and a vision discussion. Boy, listen to me. I'm not exactly Bart Starr, but I do think that's what it is. I think he just misses guys sometimes, just doesn't see them or sees them too late.
Yeah, we saw in 2018, his freshman year. We saw him. They hit a lot of pass plays down the field now, and I think your natural inclination was that would just continue to get better. Part of that conversation is, Scott has said over and over again that their receiver room is in a better place now than it was when they got here. And numbers-wise, that's true. And it may turn out that a lot of the young players that they like in that receiver room, go on to have great careers. But, what player have they missed more the last 2 seasons than Stanley Morgan and what Stan gave them in 2018?
Oh, my gosh, Parker.
He made such a difference. You can beat a guy to the post and go up and win a 50-50 ball or just run by someone. They simply have not had that.
I just think that point needs to be driven home. That's the kind of player they lack, and that has a glaring effect on the quarterback. Some of this, I guess I know I'm always being somewhat of an apologist for Adrian, but some of it I feel like is necessary because of what you just said. Think about how different Adrian's world is if he has Stanley Morgan there to help him, right?
Yeah.
It's way different. It's a way different situation if you can line up Stanley Morgan with Wan'Dale Robinson and how about 2 Dedrick Mills in the backfield? How about 2? He goes off the field and another one comes on that can get you 90 yards. That makes Adrian's job immeasurably easier.
Would that be just like 2 number 26s, or would that be 1 number 54, or how do you see that?
No, I don't know how you do it, but 2 guys of that talent, two guys of that size and talent.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Scott asked, "Do we need to hire a full-time special teams coordinator?"
Yes.
What happened to our Aussie punter who supposedly had a non-season-ending injury? Special teams continue to kill the Huskers. Well, Daniel Cherney, the Aussie punter, that season-ending injury, the non-season-ending injury, clearly actually was season-ending. He wasn't available at all this year. If he would have been, you would have seen him. I don't think there's a big mystery there. But yeah, special teams really hurt, especially the second half of the season. The place kicking was a lot better with Connor Culp, but virtually everything else was still really problematic. Return coverage. They had one punt blocked, had a couple others that almost got blocked. Gave up 2 first downs, 2 punters running the ball with nobody around this year. I mean, yeah, just too many big in-game mistakes, I think, to be passable. So that conversation about the special teams coordinator or a full-time coach in that regard is an interesting one. And if there is movement on the staff, regardless of what form that takes, you just wonder if that's going to become part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's at least got to be part of the conversation.
Let's see. Greg says the Huskers shouldn't pass on the opportunity to play in a bowl game. They need bowl experience. They forgot what it's like.
Well, I mean, I think this is a complicated conversation. I thought they should have played, but where it gets complicated is I don't think some people don't understand exactly what they went through to play 8 games.
Right.
It's significant. They test every day. The kids basically have to be in quarantine. It's pretty rigorous in that regard. So it takes a toll on everybody. Long season. I get it. I do get it. But I think one more week would have been good. One more week, have a bowl. And don't look at it as a reward. You don't have to, it's just an extra game. You don't have to size it up as a reward. It's just another game on the schedule to play.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Sipple. That like I think it would have been great for them to play another game. And I think that there would have been a lot of benefit in it. The one thing I would add to that conversation is that the experience of playing in a bowl game is not what it would have been in a normal year. I mean, you're not going to Nashville for 4 days and all your family and some of your friends are going to come and you're going to get to hang out, or you're going to be in Tampa and you're going to get to go to the beach for a day. And, like none of that is part of the deal this year because of COVID. I mean, you're getting on a plane to go sit in a hotel room like you normally do for a road game, play, and then fly home. It's really I think they were still in line to get the swag and all of that goes along with the bowl game. But like experience-wise, it would have been different. I think it still would have been useful, but it would not have been the sort of like, hey, season's over, the veterans get 2 weeks off, then we'll come back and gear up for a bowl game and go somewhere warm and have a few days of fun. Like that is not what the experience would have been like this year.
I think they'd be doing it. I think they'd be doing it right now if they would have beaten Minnesota, had a 3-game winning streak, 4-4 with a chance to go over 500. I think if they had beaten Minnesota, we'd still be covering football right now.
Yeah.
I think that game looms large in the conversation.
I totally agree with you. Yep. I think that would have changed. I think that would have done it. I even wonder if they just would have, even if they would have lost Minnesota, if they would have played that game on Friday at home rather than at Rutgers, not got back in the middle of the night. I just wonder.
Yeah.
Jared asks, which seniors are most likely to stick around with this extra year? Diedrich Mills.
Do it, Parker.
Well, it's funny
you have a good handle on this.
It's 12:30 on the clock. I think that's the time that my story about the decisions in front of the seniors is set to be posted to HuskerExtra.com. So after this chat, you can read that. I'll tell you briefly the general gist of what I wrote, which is that there's those guys have tough decisions to make. I think in particular, the guys on defense, there's 6 of them left to make decisions, seniors, that is. And I see we have a question about Cam Taylor-Britt in there too. He's just a junior, but we can talk about him too. All 6 of those guys, Ben Stilley, Will Honus, JoJo Dillman, and the 3 starting defensive backs, Boodle, Williams, Dismuke, they're all in sort of interesting spots. I don't know if any of them are a guaranteed NFL draft pick, but all of them played the best football of their careers this year. Doman got invited to the Shrine Bowl, so that's a good sign for him in terms of his stock, by NFL evaluators. But it's not a simple conversation like a lot of the things we've talked about. It's what are your draft prospects right now, but also every single one of those guys is redshirted. So is a 6th year of being in a college football program, like, is that going to markedly increase your pro stock. I would think, I don't know, given who those 6 guys are, I would think that that's primarily what's on their minds, is about continuing to play football. I wouldn't. There's some guys who have made it pretty clear that they're not looking at trying to get to the NFL. Like on the offensive side, Christian Gaylord wrote a really nice piece, which if you haven't read, you should, on Huskers.com about losing his dad and having a knee injury last year and going through that and who he's relied on and what that process has been like. And at the end of it, he makes a joke about how he's always had a dream of playing in the NFL, but he sort of understands that at this point, like he's going to be visiting Indeed.com soon to try to find a job in the real world. And so with a guy like him, maybe a guy like Bo Wilson, that might be more the way that you're looking. But there's 11 scholarship seniors left to make decisions. We obviously already know Brendan Hymas is not coming back and Colin Miller's retiring. So there's 11 more scholarship guys. Seems like Connor Culp's coming back. He wasn't even honored on senior day. And a guy like Levi Falk, he's probably a scholarship candidate if he comes back next year. So it'd be very interesting. I think some of those decisions are going to come soon. Diedrich Mills said, a few days on Friday. So it's going to be interesting. I don't think by any means that all of them are coming back. But I wouldn't be surprised if a few at least do. So there's some that are really hard to tell, though. I mean, I'm not trying to project anything onto those guys, but take Ben Stille. I mean, the guy played the best football of his career so far this fall. That's a tough question to answer. Do I get more out of coming back and maybe continuing to flourish in this system, or I'm healthy? Do I jump now and try to test as well as I can and impress NFL teams right
Some
now?
of it is an age question, too. Deontay Williams is 24 years old, or he's going to be 24 years old. That's getting pretty far down the line without working.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
I mean, Colin Miller mentioned that to me, that, he's 23 and he's thinking about getting in the workforce, so that's a consideration too. And there's family considerations, like if some of those guys have families, and that is always a consideration.
Jason asks, why do so many fans turn their back on these kids and belittle them for choosing to spend time with their families for the holidays rather than play a meaningless game with limited practice? See, that's
no games are meaninless.
Right.
It's what I would say is I think there's a degree of sensitivity that you have to have, but you don't want to overdo that. Their families will still be there next week. I mean, you can, it's just another week, then you can go see your families. I've never heard that conversation at Nebraska in 30 years of sometimes playing in bad bowls. Nobody says, why wouldn't they just rather be with their families? It's different now, I guess, because of the pandemic. But I don't know. I mean, the family's still going to be there the week after the game, right?
I think that. I agree with you. I mean, you don't hear that in a normal year. It's not like, hey, we won 7 games, we can go play in a bowl game, but we're not going to because it's Christmas and we want to be with our families. I mean, it's not normally part of the conversation. I really, that aspect of it, I understand it, and clearly Nebraska's players aren't the only ones feeling that, given how many teams have decided not to play over the last.
That's good. Yeah, right.
So it's not like I wish they would have decided to play. I understand why they didn't, and they're certainly not alone in that conversation. And I chalk it up, like a lot of things this year, Sipple. I mean, I chalk it up to the pandemic, and whether we look back on this and say, like, man, only those guys will know if down the line they look back on it and say, gosh, I wish I would have played one more game or whatever. But, it clearly has had a toll on a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and what it does create some degree of division. I think it's important for us to continue to emphasize that there's a lot of players on Nebraska's team that wanted to play. I mean, it's not just a one-sided conversation at all.
Right.
There's a lot of guys that were tired and wanted to get home, but there's a lot on the other side of that. So I think the pandemic creates that too.
Yeah, a couple from Lucas here.
Hi, Lucas.
We'll start with this one. Any rumblings about what Cam Taylor-Britt does? Defense took a massive step this year. Yeah, look, I mean, Cam Taylor-Britt is in a situation where, I mean, he's like Nebraska hasn't had a guy in this position in a while, but he's in it where if he gets a really high recommendation from the NFL Draft Advisory Committee, I mean, look, if someone tells you you're going to be picked in the first 100 picks, it's really hard to say no to that. So like a lot of guys who are juniors who are draft eligible, it probably, and I don't know this, I haven't talked to Cam about this specifically, but for a lot of those guys, it's just a conversation about what does the NFL tell you? And the fact that he was second team all Big Ten by the coaches, that tells you the level of respect that he has around the league. I mean, I thought, that like I saw today Greg Newsome from Northwestern declared for the draft. He's a 3-and-out guy. I thought that, and now we didn't see everyone who was on those lists. Like we didn't see Michigan State play this year. We saw Ohio State week 1. So before they really got fully into the season, for my money, I thought that the two best corners that we saw play this year, Sipple, were Greg Newsome from Northwestern and Cam. So,
Hey, think about something, Parker. Think about this. If you're him, now I don't know how this affects the conversation, but he's only been playing corner for 3 years, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now his upside is really high. I mean, he's
really high. Yeah.
His gains are going to be greater than a lot of guys who have played the position for a long time. I mean, man, I would almost say come back another year and look at how much better you might be with one more year. I mean, you're still growing at that position exponentially because you haven't played it very long.
Right.
You have Travis Fisher, who was a 6-year starter at corner in the NFL, guiding you. I would think one more year would make a lot of sense to that guy.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Keep honing your skills and maybe become a first rounder. And you can almost look at it in terms of dollars and cents. I mean, if you're going to get drafted in the 4th round, you're not going to make near as much money as you're going to if you get drafted in the 1st. It might be a gamble.
Yeah, no, those are the decisions that these guys have to make, and they can be tough ones. I mean, if you're telling them, hey, you're a 4th, 5th round pick, you're definitely getting picked probably, after pick 100 or something like that. That's a lot different than saying, yeah, we think you're sort of day 2, late 2nd, 3rd round, somewhere in there. I mean, you're talking about a lot of difference in money, obviously. And then, like you say, I mean, kid's got a ton of upside too. So definitely one of the more interesting decisions that'll be made here in the next few weeks. And then Lucas's other question or comment was that Turner Corcoran looked legit in his first ever start.
Yeah, he did. He's very athletic. You pointed that out. It wasn't perfect, and it's not going to be perfect for a guy like that in his first start. But man, you got to think about him in 3 years. That picture is going to look really good.
I thought I was really impressed with how he did not look like a true freshman just from a physical standpoint. He's going to get a lot bigger and a lot stronger over the course of his career, but it did not look like what it looked like with Brendan Hymus when Hymus was a true freshman, thrown in there. And Hymus held up really well in 2017, all things considered. But he told us a couple of weeks ago about how he was 265 pounds and all that. And I think Turner weighs a little bit more than that at this point. 300.
I think he's a 300-pounder.
Wade says missing a guy like J.D. Spielman was huge this year. Well, yeah, I mean, J.D. didn't end up staying healthy this year. He missed most of the season. But, they sorely lack for playmakers, that's for sure. Quite a few players were saying their farewells to Dedrick Mills on Twitter. Take that for what it's worth. Yeah, Jason, I saw that.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Maybe they know something that hasn't been announced. Maybe they just were happy for the guy on senior, in what was maybe his last game. But yeah, I saw that Cooper Jewett and Savion Morrison, I think both said they were going to miss him. So, have you seen an unusual dip at all in stats or clicks with any material because fans just can't handle it anymore? James, that's a good question. I don't.
Not really.
We probably shouldn't go too deep into that conversation. Our bosses may not appreciate that, but we've had strong readership all year, which of course we really appreciate. Katie, other than Wandale, who do you guys think will be the up and coming leaders for this team? It's a good question. Sipple, what do you think?
Well, you better start up front. I think Cam Jurgens has to be.
Yep.
At that position, especially. Are we just talking on offense?
No, I say flip it around because you could put Ty Robinson and Casey Rogers in that conversation too.
Yeah, I think it's important for them to be. And I do think a guy like Reimer and a guy like Nick Henrich can start to evolve in that role, in part because again, it's a position that lends itself to that type of leadership. And those guys should become that. Those are the guys that come to mind right off. McCaffrey. Hey, McCaffrey's in that role too.
100%. Yes.
He's a natural leader.
Bob says, selfishly, I was hoping for reports from Sipple and Shreveport, but I will endure. Yeah, we were all hoping for that, Bob.
Yeah, selfishly, I was hoping for it too. Trust me.
Navy asks, can Smothers run or passing or just passing lack of receipt? Yeah, Smothers can run. He's 10.8 and 100. He would challenge for being the fastest guy in that room. They can all run. Gosh, we've got a ton of questions in here. We're like, I'm looking at questions that were submitted a half hour ago. It's pretty awesome. Thank you, everybody. Let's see. Have we seen the Colorado State transfer lineman on the field yet? Lonnie, no, we have not. That's Nori Newelli. He's another young guy in the program.
Good question.
We have not. He was eligible this year. He traveled for a while. He wasn't on the game roster the last couple weeks, I don't think. So yeah. Hey guys, thanks for all your articles and input. Oh, thanks, Joshua. Thank you for reading. Simple does break out the back scratcher during these things sometimes.
I did one time. I was hoping nobody noticed.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people watching. So, LJS boys, what's up? What's up, Justin? Oh boy, this thing jumps around a little bit. Sometimes. How hard is it to block in the zone read game since linemen never really know which way the ball's going? Zach, yeah, it's a fair question. It's pretty simple actually. They know, that there's two options in terms of who keeps the ball. So typically what you're doing is the play side is considered where the running back is going. But typically, like when you're running zone read out of the shotgun, like typically your unblocked player is on the back side of the formation. So the quarterback is reading, whether a lineman is coming down toward the running back going, let's say, to the left. And so if that guy crashes down, then you're pulling it and going to the right where a space has been vacated by the read player. So it's not always that simple. And college defenses, there's great athletes that can make those plays in the backfield, and also, defenses prepare for that, but that's the general gist of it. Let's see. A lot of this is stuff that we've talked about. So do you guys have any Husker gear, Adrian? I do not.
No, we typically, we're objective, and that objective thing is important because you don't get emotionally wrapped up in it. We're worn out enough without getting emotionally wrapped up in it.
Nebraska doesn't necessarily have a talent issue at receiver, Matt says, but they do have an issue consistently getting talent on the field.
I'm open to that conversation. I like, now don't get me wrong. There's some guys that they've brought into the program that I thought were very helpful this year. Levi Falk. I think Levi Falk's was really helpful. And he's helpful because of his willingness to do anything. I think Oliver Martin can be a pretty good player in the program. He was a 4-star recruit at one time in his life, and you can see why. I think Betts could be a big time player in this program. And I love, and Parker, this. I love Alante Brown. I think, that's a playbook issue from what I've heard. But if he gets dialed in, man, he's just got a lot of talent. He's a tough kid too. You can tell it. They wouldn't put him back there. They would not put him back there for kickoffs if he was not a tough kid. So I have a lot of those guys. Parker, I like those guys.
I said this on the radio this morning, and I really believe it. I don't want to use COVID and the odd off season as just like a blanket excuse for every problem.
No, you can't.
I don't, and you can't do that. But I wonder, I don't know this for sure. I'm not going to make any grand proclamations about it, but I wonder how much a real or sort of normal quote unquote off season will help those guys in particular. They didn't have that. They just did not have that this year. Now, you wish that it still would have come along a little quicker, and Scott said that several times over the course of the year. He's just finally flat out said it late in the year that he wished the running back and receiver rooms had developed a little quicker than they did over the course of the season. But I do wonder about, what a normal winter conditioning and spring ball will look like for those guys. And remember, too, so Betts, Alante Brown was the only one of that whole group that was on campus from January on. The rest of them, Levi Falk, I think was a summer guy, too. So anyways, all of those guys arrived in the summer in the midst of the pandemic. They're trying to get onboarded and figure it all out. It'll be interesting to see if there's a big jump in the development in that group.
There's a confusing element to that conversation to me that maybe you can help me with. They were okay. So not all of them were on campus. All those young guys, all those. We're talking about Alante Brown, Betts, Omar Manning, I guess. Who else are we talking about? Young receivers. That would be the main ones. They were around. You had so much off season. Right. You had a lot of downtime. That's why I'm surprised when you talk about Alante Brown. He was here. Couldn't he be in a playbook? Couldn't guys, his own players, be working with him, running the offense?
I wonder about that. There's a particular NFL team that I follow pretty carefully, and they've talked about how part of the reason that the Packers think that they've taken a huge jump on offense this year is because Aaron Rodgers and the coaches spent so much time on Zoom together talking through sort of philosophically what they liked about the first year in this offense, what they didn't, and getting better from that. But that's an entirely different conversation than a kid being on a college campus and looking at a college playbook for the first time ever and trying to pick it up and conceptualize it and get used to it. So
good point.
I think that I wonder if they thought that maybe all of that classroom time would have translated into a quicker transition, but maybe there's no substitute for being on the field and doing it.
Well, and there's limitations in college that aren't there in the NFL. There's time limitations.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think the coaches could work with the players as much as they wanted. Right. There's restrictions. So that enters into the conversation.
What happened to Betts and what are the prospects for the polar bear? Mitchell, good questions with Betts. We don't know categorically, but my suspicion is that if they'd have played past 21 more days or 17 as the rules are in the Big Ten now, that he probably would have been back. As for Nash, Hutmacher, the polar bear, they really like him. He just, that was a pretty good group up front, and it's hard for true freshmen to get on the field. He was in uniform for, maybe 4 or 5 games this year. So, he's another guy that they think is going to be a big part of that front seven in the future. Are we eyeing any notable players in the transfer portal? Justin, good question. I guess the simplest answer there is we'll find out. I would be interested in TJ Pledger from Oklahoma, but I suspect that a lot of programs will be. Who has the best feet in the NFL? I'm talking bare feet, Welfare God asks.
Wow, I have no idea. I have no earthly idea.
Definitely not Antonio Brown after seeing his mangled frozen feet on Hard Knocks.
What happened to that? What did he do to those things?
He tried to do like a cryotherapy thing in France or something, and they burned his feet because it was so cold.
That was amazing.
Zach, should Kevin Warren keep his job?
I don't know. Don't get me started on all that.
Okay,
I think it's a worn out topic. He's keeping his job. So that's it.
Yeah, and did you see it? Northwestern's AD, who probably was the number 2 candidate for that job now, is the new commissioner of the ACC.
Jim Phillips.
Matthew says, Frost talks about needing to win to gain confidence. How about getting on the field and making a handful of plays without knowing the entire playbook to gain confidence for a single player? Yeah, Matthew. I mean, I totally understand the sentiment there. The counter to that would be, they tried that early in the season. They played guys a few snaps here and a few snaps there. And that guy blows an assignment or gets a penalty, or then you're substituting all the time because this guy only knows these 10 plays and this guy knows these 15 or whatever. I mean, that's a hard way to get in any kind of rhythm as an offense.
I think there's what I've heard is that Frost basically evolved into thinking, if you're going to play, learn the playbook. Now, I know that I can be a little hard line, but I think that's what you got to do. Like, I don't think it's acceptable to say, how many guys can you say that to? Oh, you just got to learn a few plays. Learn the playbook. I mean, do it for yourself, but also listen to me. Get up. I just can't help myself sometimes. Do it for yourself, but also do it for the guys around you so they can rely on you. There's guys relying on you. Why do you want to be babysat? I mean, just learn the plays. You shouldn't have to look at the guy next to you or run to the quarterback and say, what am I supposed to do? It just messes up the operation. Coach Sipple has spoken.
There you go. You can get off the soapbox now.
I jumped off of it.
I 100% agree with you. Cameron says Adrian's turnovers is something we should come to expect. And he has the numbers for the past 3 seasons, 11 games and 14 turnovers in 2018, 10 games and 13 turnovers in 2019, and 7 games and 8 turnovers in 2020. Yeah, it's been an issue.
Yeah. I don't know, Parker. I'm just going to open up to a glaring deficiency. How do you figure out how many lost fumbles he had?
Well, if you're me, you have a spreadsheet where you track it. Because
you track it. Okay.
Yeah, there's not a clean answer to that question. Nobody
tracks it?
Like these stats. Yeah. In each game, there's a little thing. Here, I'll show you. If you get this paper stats, then in each game at the bottom here, it says fumbles. But they do not keep track. Like most schools don't keep track individually, and there's not very many websites out there actually that track individual fumbles. So I just do it myself.
Right, that's a problem. That's why
Cameron's number is 7 fumbles, 5 lost for Martinez. That's the right number for this year. So yeah, it's been, and I think those numbers are in the rewind today. So it's been an issue. It's been an issue, no doubt, all the way through for Adrian. Joshua says we now have Harburg added to the conversation, which makes things even more interesting. The analysts that covered the game agreed that Adrian sewed up the number 1 QB1 quarterback conversation for next year, which will make a lot of fans angry. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's been they didn't decide who was playing quarterback in some games this year till middle of the week. I don't think there's been any decisions made about 2021.
No, he'll have to win the job again. What's so funny?
Someone is spamming our YouTube comments.
What's happening?
Just a couple letters here, a couple letters there. What's up with Manning? Yeah, Josh. People ask me this over and over and over again, and I'm telling you, the only thing that we know is that we've been told consistently all year that he's not healthy. Frost at the beginning of the season made references to both physical and mental health. They didn't get him to a point where he felt like he could play this year. I know that he said on social media at different times he's not planning to transfer. So we'll see. We'll see if they can get him to a point, or if he can get himself to a point health-wise, physical and mental. And I'm not trying to belittle that conversation at all. But we'll see. We'll see if over the next few months he gets to a point where he can help him. Because physically, there's no doubt that he can. But the best ability is availability, as they say. Didn't know that Frost was part of the Tomlin tree. Yeah, yep. He is indeed. Tomlin, Raheem Morris, that whole crew was really impactful on Scott, not only as a player in the NFL. He had to figure out basically how to be a defensive player once he was in the league, defense and special teams, and so he gives that group of coaches a lot of credit. And still, I think that's a big part of. He's learned from a ton of coaching luminaries, from Osborne, obviously, Bill Walsh, and then
Parcells.
Parcells, and then Tomlin, Raheem Morris, and all those guys. So, Mills posted an interesting video on Twitter. Yeah, Brian, I saw that. Well, I think it's probably, is it the same one that he put on Instagram? I saw that it said that his next. Oh yeah, next decision will be his best decision. So we'll see. I'm guessing that'll come in the next few days. How much stock do you put into recruiting rankings? That's a good question. A couple more, and then we should jump because we've been doing this almost an hour. Thank you guys all for joining us. Some. They clearly matter. Sipple, earmuffs.
Oh, they do. No, I agree with that.
They matter. I'm curious in the grand scheme of things how we'll look at recruiting rankings this year in particular. Nobody has seen high school players as much this year as in years past because of the pandemic. So if there is a year to take them with a little extra grain of salt, this would be a good year to do that. That's my guess. We'll see how it plays out.
I always say that they're just. I just regard them as a one data point. I just don't think. I think it's unhealthy and unwise to look at them as the be all end all and make your determinations about a program based on what their recruiting ranking is. Yeah, it's too simple. It's just, but it is something I definitely look at.
Yep.
The track record of the respective sites is pretty good. So yeah, I look at it. If there's a 5-star, 4-star kid, it gets my attention.
Who physically has the best feet among Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Peyton Manning? Welfare God, I don't know. I wouldn't quibble with number 12 in green and gold's footwork, but I think you might literally be talking about feet, in which case I have no opinion. I'm just saying, let a guy continue to play without continuing to increase his knowledge of the playbook. Yeah. I see what you're saying, Matt. They did that a little bit. Like with Xavier Betts, for example. They worked him in slowly. They got him in some positions to play a little bit. And I think that probably helped his confidence. So it can work. You just can't have 6 guys who can each do 1/6 of the playbook. That's not a good way to build an offense. Or that's not a good way to have a good offense. Martinez has 15 fumbles lost and 20 interceptions in his career. Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
15 fumbles lost and 20 interceptions in his career.
Okay, 15 fumbles lost. That's a pretty big number.
It is. Any chance McCaffrey will get moved to a receiver and running back next season? Roger, we talked a little bit about that. Hard to say. I think the ball is going to – I don't know this, but, Luke himself is obviously going to have a big voice in that conversation in terms of what he wants to do. Piper and Hickson starting guards next fall. Dan, good question. Piper would be in good shape to have one, it seems. He started most of this year. It'll depend a little bit on what Matt Farniok decides to do, if he comes back for an extra year or not. And then they've got a lot of young guys that are going to compete for time there. You wonder, there's only 2 tackle spots, so you can't start all of Turner Corcoran, Brant Banks, and Bryce Bennett at tackle. So, maybe Brant Banks is part of the conversation at guard. They've got some other young guys there too. So, there should be a lot of competition on the offensive line.
Who else are we talking about at guard besides Hickson, Piper? Who else are we talking about?
Well, you could potentially be talking about a guy like Brock Bando or Sichterman. Those guys both are juniors. You've got some young players. I would never expect a freshman to necessarily be in that conversation, but Henry Latovsky will be on campus in January. He's 6'6" and 320 pounds. He's not exactly like normal sized for an incoming freshman. You wouldn't expect that, but you can't totally rule it out either.
No.
And then they've got that big group of redshirt freshmen who, we've heard a lot, obviously, of Bennett, Piper, and Banks so far, but there's 3 more guys in that class too. Michael Lynn, Jimmy Fritchie, and Matthew Anderson. So Lynn's been a guard, I think, most of his time here. So maybe he gets in the mix there, but they've got options. The question is, and then Newelly too, the kid from Norris, the exchange student. So I guess we'll find out. Let's see. Sip, Runza or Vals?
Both. Oh, should I do the politically correct thing? They're both good. I do like the Val's option of a salad with Dorothy Lynch and a big breadstick. So yeah, I kind of favor that. My wife, I got my wife a Runza burger on Saturday on the way home from the airport, and she was delighted by it. So
fantastic. The Colorado and Iowa O-line transfers. Yeah. Colorado State. That's Newelly and Ezra Miller from Iowa.
Ezra Miller.
He was a 4-star recruit too back when he was in high school, and I think he was still sort of getting acclimated this year. So yeah, we'll see if either of those guys can make a run. Daniels and Bando earned their degrees. Have you heard if they'll return? Haven't heard otherwise, Dan. They both have eligibility left. They're juniors. Damian Daniels, I think, took a step forward in his game this fall, and he's a guy who could be in line for a big senior season if he stays on the track he's been on. Alex asks, what would you think of Lovie Smith as a coordinator? Well,
I don't think you're looking for a defensive coordinator.
Yeah. I mean, I think he'd be a good defensive coordinator for somebody, but I don't think Nebraska's going to be in the market for one. The defense got quite a bit better this year. I would be grateful for a Vals if you come to Michigan for the Michigan State game on September 25th. I'll be getting tickets to the game. Katie, yeah. Hopefully we're trying to smuggle some Guinness back from Ireland, but we'll see about that.
Yeah.
Okay, last one, and then we're going to get out of here. We're over an hour, Sipple. This has been awesome. Do you think that they will get the lack of discipline addressed by next year, Greg asked? Basically, the killer penalties and dumb things that seem to kill us at the worst time.
I mean, those are – I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say yes because, I mean, I just think it's irresponsible just to give them a rubber stamp. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty complicated discussion too. It's not just a coach that goes into practice and says, "All right, we got to stop the penalties."
Right.
There's something breaking down during the week where it's not being addressed properly. I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot. You can't assess it without seeing practice, and we don't see practices.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It is something that needs to get better, though. I mean, penalties and special teams errors and turnovers, and just that, even before you get into the offensive shortcomings and all of that, I mean, would make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's just. I mean, they're not talented enough to consistently overcome that stuff.
Yeah. All right, Sipple, I'm going to send you out on a curveball. Manchester United or Liverpool?
Oh, definitely Liverpool.
Yeah, of course.
Stronger up front.
All right, weird. It's been a weird football season. There's Sipple's in-depth Champions League. I don't even know if that's the right term. Analysis. Jeremy says these guys for the best hour of the day. Kyle says that breaks my heart that you picked Liverpool. I had a Man U jersey back in the day because I went to England once. But anyways, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you to Tom Dinsdale, Hyundai of Grand Island, Tom Dinsdale Automotive Group for sponsoring this all season long. That's a wrap-up show. That's a wrap on the wrap-up show. We've got a ton of stuff on HuskerExtra.com. We'll continue to, obviously, through the week here and through the holidays, and then we're in full off-season mode. So plenty of moving and shaking to happen, you'd think, between now and spring ball. We'll have coverage for all of it at HuskerExtra.com. And if I could just put a quick plug in, this would be a great time to subscribe. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. $5 for 5 months of the Journal-Star, not just sports, but everything there. So check that out. For Sipple, I'm Parker. Thank you so much for being with us all season long, and we will talk to you soon.